Haha, that looks really cute.
Oh, I love it!
You're listening to the Mike Cassidy Photography Podcast. It's your real-world photography business masterclass with no BS and no magic shortcuts. Here's your host, Mike Cassidy.
And boom goes the dynamite. And boom goes the dynamite. Greetings, boys and girls.
Greetings, boys and girls.
My name is Michael.
My name is Michael.
And I'm your neighbor.
I am your neighbor.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
What's going on, everybody? Actually, I've had a pretty quiet and uneventful past couple of weeks or so, and not a couple of client sessions, but everything is just like remarkably smooth sailing right now. And actually, it's been quiet, maybe a little too quiet. Usually I'm getting more like last minute inquiries for Christmas, but so far there hasn't been that surge, and it's getting up to the wire here. So this is going to be interesting, and I'm wondering if what's going on this year is going to affect Christmas business a lot, or maybe it's just random variance. We'll have to see. And one thing I was thinking about, though, and we don't talk a lot of photography gear here on this show, but I think I'm planning on buying one of the new Nikon mirrorless cameras, the Z6 II or the Z7 II, whereas most of the rest of the world pronounces it Z6 II or Z7 II when they come out. I think they're coming out soon. I've been putting off this for so long. And when Nikon, I guess, released their first batch of mirrorless cameras, it's probably a couple of years ago now. I was like, you knew that was happening, and I was excited. I like buying new cameras every once in a while, and I wanted to get one. And then the details started coming out, and although apparently these cameras take great photos, it seems they really weren't designed for like pro photographers, and we're seeing they had just like single SD cards, and most importantly, at least for me, there was no like vertical grip, so I never got one. Just kind of using the same cameras I've had now for a while. And everybody, I guess, has their sticklers, and for me, as somebody who spends like half of my time holding the camera sideways and taking portrait oriented photos, I need a grip. And the grip for me has another function, that you really don't hear about. You see, like, I have big man hands, and cameras aren't necessarily always so big. So adding that grip to the camera increases the size of it and makes it easier to hold for a few hours. It's not like I'm holding something teeny tiny in my hands or uncomfortable and squeezing this small camera. Like, to me, that's a big deal. I need a larger sized body, and, mirrorless cameras tend to be smaller, and I need something bigger to work, I think, more comfortably with my hands. So looks like the new Z6 II and Z7 II will have this fully functioning grip. So that's interesting for me. And then also, I guess they also have second card slots now, and I'm sure I could live with one. I feel better having two. I guess you're just used to that. And I think maybe I've only ever experienced one card failure. But in like situations when you're with a client, or if you're like a wedding photographer, there's no do-overs, so when you're there in that moment, things have got to be working. And if there's an issue, you can't go back and try again. So that second slot really gives a bit of security and redundancy. And I always kind of like that feeling. And, I know CF Express and XQD cards are like fairly resilient, but it's nice. It's nice to have that second card slot. It gives me peace of mind. So I think I'll be picking up one of those cameras towards the end of the year. I don't even really know when they're like officially released, so I'll wait, see some immediate feedback, and then I'll go grab one or the other and treat myself, for the year. And speaking of treats, today's show is a treat. in the scale of treats, it's like a giant hot fudge sundae with giant whipped cream and 2 cherries on top. Our guest today is Nicole Begley of Hair of the Dog. And she's got a lot going on. What are you going to do? She's the founder of the Hair of the Dog Academy, which is an online community where she teaches pet photographers to create successful businesses. She's the author of the book, Pet and Equine Photography for Everybody, which is available on Amazon. And she also hosts the Hair of the Dog podcast. And she operates her own photography business in the Charlotte, North Carolina market. And after all that, she's exhausted. Now, she's not exhausted. She's okay. And so this was good. And, and even though I'm like a super genius, I don't like acting like it. I prefer to be more of like a casual doofus. But hey, that's just how I am. I don't like acting smart. But when I talk to Nicole, I have to be smart because she knows what's going on. She knows the business of photography. And in this show, which was fun, we cover a lot of ground, everything from getting your business off on the right foot to why you shouldn't be comparing yourself to other businesses, to learning how to create value in the things and the products that you offer. And there's a lot in there. And speaking of being exhausted, I was the one who was exhausted after all this stuff, but it's good. And how I came across her by listening to her podcast. Actually, I found it just searching through one day, and I was like, and she's on the ball. She knows what she's doing. And I highly recommend listening to her podcast, which is also called Hair of the Dog. There's a lot of great business advice. And Nicole, she has this gift of clarity, and she can explain things in a no-nonsense, straightforward way that a lot of people can't do. She's really smart. So if you want to learn how to grow your photography business, she's somebody you really want to listen to. So do it. Do it. Do it. And as always, I like hearing from you. You can connect with me online on Instagram at Mike Cassidy Podcast or via my email, mike@thephotographypodcast.show, if you feel like reaching out to me. And thanks so much, and see you on the next show. This podcast and my website both focus on the goal of translating the art and business of photography and making it accessible and understandable to everyone. My goal is to provide the best content in photography for you, the listener. I've assembled a great team of photography guests and experts to make this happen. What I've chosen to do is create a subscriber model for my audience. If you value what I'm doing, you can become a member and support this podcast. In exchange, you'll get benefits over and above what's available for free. It's my goal to ensure that subscribers will definitely get back more than they give. I've created a membership program that brings you far more in-depth content if you want to take your knowledge of photography to the next level. Members will receive episodes with complete, unabridged interviews with our guests. Members will also get exclusive access to listen to and participate in AMA episodes. And there's more. If you would like to learn more now, head over to thephotographypodcast.show/subscribe. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode. The one thing I'm really, though, excited to talk to you because I guess I randomly came across your show, maybe even a couple months ago, and you remind me a lot of like me in the sense that when I listen to your show, it's like no nonsense.
Yeah.
You're like, that's not going to work. You got to do it like this. There's no like, oh, well, maybe, And I was like, yeah, you tell them that's not going to, you can't have a bad website and you can't do this. And you can't, you're like very definitive on these things. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't do. They want to be like, please, again, to everybody, they want to please everybody that's like listening to their shows. And it's not like, yeah, no, you can't do this. And, and the one thing that's very weird about, and I've talked to this before about, there's so many people out there teaching and educating about photography. And there's so many that just don't, you can listen and you just know that they really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, right.
They just don't have the experience. And then when you do come across somebody, you're like, wow, and you stop and you want to listen. So that was like your show.
Oh, yay. Thanks.
I'm like, listen to your episodes. So yeah, everybody needs to know about that.
Yeah, thanks.
And get on there and listen to that. So it's definitely great. And you're like really like one of the smartest photography content producers, I think, out there in terms of what you're doing.
Thank you.
Just like all this gushing is going on. It's very unlike me. It must be all that caffeine.
All that caffeine going to your head.
Ooh, it's all now the crash comes and it's all like it's all down.
I'll yell if your head drops on your keyboard. I'll wake it up.
That's right. You could take over. Just do your own show. Just keep on going. If I drop out. And well, first of all, you can introduce yourself. Today I'm talking to Nicole. So go ahead and I'll keep yammer and you can step in, Nicole, and tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hey, everybody. Nicole from Nicole Begley Photography and Hair of the Dog here. So excited to be here on this podcast today. Thanks, Mike, for having me. Gosh, my background. Let's see. I used to be a zoological animal trainer for 13 years after college and worked my way up to kind of basically essentially middle management and didn't love my job as much as I used to. Still love the animals, still love my team. But sometimes it's challenging when you're not really, can't make all the decisions, but have to live by many decisions. So anyway, I was looking for something to do because I always had this entrepreneurial spirit. I loved creating things and thought about becoming a dog trainer because I knew animal training really well. But I knew that I did not have the patience for the people if I went back a week later and they were like, why is my dog still doing this? Why did you not do your homework? Oh, well, that would be why, but he should not do that. So anyway, I didn't have any patience for people that wouldn't do their work. So I'm like, that's not going to work. So I actually...
You figured that out sooner than later.
Exactly. I knew. I was like, if I could take the dogs, then I would totally be down with
and
it.
leave the people. Yeah, who wants to deal with people?
Exactly. The people can be challenging sometimes. But then I realized I really loved photography. I knew nothing about it other than like point my camera and press a button. But I really enjoyed taking pictures of the animals that I had always worked with. And so I thought, I could maybe try this whole photography thing. And that was 2009, 2010 when I got started with that. And at the time, I started doing pets on the side a little bit because I thought that would just be fun. Didn't think it could be a full-time genre that I would have to do families or something else too. So I also did families, did high school seniors for a little bit at the beginning because surely you can't just be a pet photographer. But
that can't be a living.
Yeah, right. Turns out you can. It just took me about 5 years to make the leap to say, oh my gosh, I can really do this. I can really focus on what I absolutely love to photograph, which is animals, dogs and horses mainly.
And here you are.
Yeah.
You did it. No, and it's interesting. And I bet, and because I know someone who used or still does do pets, not really like full time, and it was always like insulting because I've been with her when someone came, like that's what you do for a living. Like
right.
There's this, they can't believe that could be like a job. So I imagine you run into that kind of a lot
all the time,
getting started, and you're
like, that's... even people that like family, aunts, uncles, and whatnot. They're like, oh wow, really? That's it? That's your full-time job? Yes, sure is.
Yeah, you at least you talk about it. I don't even talk about what I do. I make up some job.
Like I work in a bank.
Yeah,
really boring. Nobody asks about that.
That Michael, we're so proud of him. What is he doing? Oh, he works in a bank. He works in a bank? I don't know. That's what we just tell Grandma. Little does she know. So you went on years and years and years, and basically what we're going to be talking about today is, the idea of growing the business. And what I found interesting about one of your shows was it's like fascinating to me. And I'm guessing in pet photography here too, there are different strata. And this is something we'll talk about a little bit, just like in weddings or anything else. There's high end, I'm guessing there's the middle ground, and there's people who are like kind of entry level. And one of the fascinating things to me And this is something I just actually I had a call from a woman in the beginning of June, because in the summer, mostly I do women. In year round. In the summer, I got doing some beach families. I live right by the ocean, so I'll go down, and I don't know how that happened, but now it's like a thing. So I get stuck with all these crying kids in the summer when I can only take so much. Maybe I should be drinking something other than Pepsi. But, I will get a call from a woman, and this happened in June. I just happened to be in my car at Home Depot, and I pick up the phone, and she's like, yeah, we want our family. And she goes, and all I really want is just all the photos on a CD, And I'm like, well, that's not really how it works. But yet there's this ongoing thing out there, and there's so many photographers. And she said, well, the last person that took our photos, that's all they did. We paid them $35, and she did all this and gave us the CD. I'm like, no, couldn't understand it. Like, they cannot,
right.
That brain cannot, understand what we charge by the photo. And I'm talking to her. I'm like, well, when you go in a restaurant and you order chow mein, doesn't mean you get every other meal on the menu. You got it. All right, well, we'll get back to you. And you know what that means.
Yeah, right.
You're never. And so I don't try to. It's just not the person that I'm going to be dealing with. But it was always interesting to me that kind of mindset is just so pervasive with a lot of people who get in, and not just with pets or anything else, but in photography in general. And I'm wondering if you have any insight, or the people that you work with or talk to, really, where does that come from, and how does that even exist now in the world of photography?
Yeah, for in our clients' mindset of them expecting all that,
or even the photographer's mindset.
Yeah.
Someone's given them these products like this, and there's no way you can survive.
Yeah, no, I think because I actually had this thought when I very first started, when I was I'm going to become a photographer. And then I think it was somebody sent me, oh, look, here, you can do mini sessions. And it was look how great this is. And it was a whole day in the park, $50 a person. You get the files. You've seen it a gazillion times. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then you start to do the math, and you're like, okay, well, wait, 50 and I do 10, that's $500 for a day. That's more money than I'm making now. But you don't understand that you have all this work to prepare those clients, to edit those photos, to send those photos to the clients. By the time you usually add up all the time that you've worked on that particular client, you're making well less than minimum wage. Besides the fact that you still have to pay taxes on that money, you still have business expenses. You need to buy camera, you need to buy gear, you need to pay for insurance. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So thankfully, when I first started, I had that thought for a little bit, and then I thankfully sought out some education, and I knew nothing about PPA or any of this online. There wasn't that much online education then.
Right.
But
right. No, you're right.
Yeah. I did a search. I'm like, there's got to be a photography conference. So I ended up coming across Imaging, which is PPA's big giant conference, and I went there really as I was just planning to start my business. And that was the best decision that I ever made, because...
Yeah, so you have your photography master.
It helped me see that, digital files are not profitable in a sustainable way. So it allowed me to set my business up correctly from the get-go so that it would be sustainable. So I totally get how when you're starting out, you're like, oh, there's no cost of goods sold. It seems so shiny and easy and profitable. But until you really know how the business works, it's just not. And then the client side, there's always somebody offering those types of things. So some of them were like, oh, well, I've seen that before. So then you just need to educate them on why it's not the best choice for them, and the more full service. And, as in any type of industry, there's, Ponderosa and there's Capital Grill, and they both serve steak. So,
yeah. And I think that the one thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in this perceived value little chat we're going to have, but in the world of photography, I think it's a little bit different, because when you're talking about name brands like cars or hotels or something like that, I think these organizations sometimes spend millions of dollars on their marketing. So there's this awareness to people, whether they really want to know this or not. All right, Mercedes is expensive. They kind of understand that. But in the realm of photography, I think a lot of people, unless they're kind of explained otherwise, just think everybody's the same.
Yeah, commodity.
There's no way really that they're like and that's why shopping by price is, like I don't put, there's a whole nother conversation. I don't put pricing on my website and stuff like that. But people just see numbers, and all they're doing is comparing numbers, whereas nobody ever in their lifetime would walk into a Hyundai dealer and a Mercedes dealer and go, oh, well, your cars are $97,000 down the street. They're only $37,000. If you want me to buy this car, you're going to give it to me for that $37,000, or I'm going down. That would be something, or the person, you would look at them like they were crazy. But that's what happens, I think, in the photography universe all the time, just because there isn't that large brand identity. It's more single operators, and people may not know there's different products and different things going on. So I think their mind automatically goes to that lowest common denominator, CD for $35, maybe because Uncle Joey did that, and back in the day, and that's what they know. And, when I look at, and I know this isn't going to go anywhere, but I'm telling that woman, I don't think I've had a CD in like 8 years or 9 years. It's the last time I don't even think I have a CD on my computer. CD. I don't mean to like insult the woman, but I knew nothing was going to happen. But I'm like, I haven't dealt with CDs in a decade, lady. You're probably not the best person for you. So when somebody is starting, it always seems, not always, but, and you mentioned too, I think we were starting about the same time, 2008-ish, 2009-ish. And it wasn't like today where you go online and every third person or every second person in the world of photography is some kind of trainer or an educator. You kind of had to figure it out like on your own. I don't think you had those type of resources, and that PPA was probably a real smart thing to direct yourself towards, because they got you set straight there, and you really taught you some things. Otherwise, and people figured it out, or they didn't. Yeah, along the way.
Yeah. So. Or all of a sudden they realized, why am I working like 50 hours a week? And wait, I've made $15,000 this year.
Yeah, and that's something too that you would think you would come to terms with that really, really fast. Not like 3 years later and you're still doing this. And this is something, and I mentioned this on a previous show, that I started to do this for a blog post. We got interrupted by the virus, but what I did was I took a job timer like Toggle or one of these websites, and every time from the first email I would track, and I did it over about 4 or 5 different clients. And I had done this years ago just for this purpose to see, and I had forgotten what it was, and you'd be surprised, 15, 18 hours or more per person, all this editing from beginning to end. You're right. And then when you sit down and you look at your $45 and you've been working 18 hours and you're like in Napoleon Dynamite, that's like $1.25 an hour.
Right. It does not compute.
Right. And you need to like smack people senseless or straight sometimes but that for some reason doesn't click on people for people as well. And so today maybe we're going to talk a little bit about how to stop this, and it's not for everybody, and you'll agree with me. And your area is the pet photography business, but I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about today is more universal. You do not necessarily have to be a super high-end photographer to make money. Yeah. I think you would agree with me.
Agreed. And the pet photography world, as far as pricing and business, is very similar to any portrait genre. And truly, there are ways to have a low-cost business be profitable. So, like, I'm not saying that you can't have a lower-end high volume, but you need to make sure that your time is set. Because, like, you look at, like, school photography or sports photography where it's, like, high volume, boom, 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 boom. Those can be very profitable, but you're not spending 18 hours a client. So knowing that time and knowing that profit and dividing the two is such an important calculation to make sure that, we're not just doing this as a hobby, which is fine if you want to do it as a hobby. But if you want to run it as a business, you want to try to run it as an actual profitable business.
Yeah, and that's the great thing, I think, with the photography business. It could be a side gig. You could just be doing it once in a while to get some money for some gear. It could be part-time. It could be full-time. And it fits nicely into all those scenarios. And I'm guessing, and I don't know this, but when someone comes to you or starts going into one of your classes, usually the first thing is, all right, what's going on here and how much money do you want to make, or how do you want to structure this? Because you really can't go past, you can't even proceed unless you know, do you need to pay your bills? You got a mortgage, car payment, rent, whatever it is? Because you ain't going to do it giving a CD for somebody for $35.
That's the first thing I do in helping someone with their pricing. It's figuring out what their goals are, what they want to make, how much their business costs to run, and how many hours they're going to work. They want to work per week, and therefore how many clients they could take. And then you do all this math together, and out pops the magical target session average, where it's like, this is what I need to try to make per session. And spoiler alert, it's almost always over $1,000, usually between $1,500 and $2,000. Generally, for people that want to have 50 to 75 sessions a year and have a full-time income.
Yeah, it just makes sense. And I'm guessing in your experience too, that may vary on where you are in the country too. Here in the wonderful Northeast, the most expensive place in the universe, you may have to charge more. You could be somewhere in the middle of this country where it could have lower. But generally, I think that's a super smart way to do it is, all right, how much do I need to live?
Yep.
And then that's a real eye-opener. And again, you're not going to do it giving someone $30.
No.
You're right. You got to come up with
Unless
this number.
you're shooting like 100 kids in one day and it's boom, 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 boom.
You'd lose your mind
photos.
in a week and a half. Yeah. But that is something I saw on one of your, I forget, it was on one of your shows or somewhere, where that's one of the biggest things one of the questions you get is, how do I know how to charge?
Right.
What I'm worth. And again, people don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
So like, what are some of your tips, or how do you approach someone? How do you get them started in the right direction there?
Well, yeah, like I said, just like figuring out what it is, what our goals are, because we need to come up with that target session average, because we just need to know then, once we know, okay, my goal is to make $1,500 per session, then you can start to look at your pricing and say, how can I build this price list in a way that encourages everyone to spend $1,500? One of the things, because I like to say there's an art and a science to pricing. So there's the science with the numbers of like, here's the hours I need to work. Here's how long it takes to service a client. Here's, how much I need to make per session. And then there's the art to pricing, which is, what does this price list look like? What do I have on my price list? Do I have collections? Do I have bonus schedules, where things like a digital file or all the digital files become less expensive the more products they buy, or a certain price point, they can get them complimentary. There are so many different ways to do this. But it's really important to look at that and say, all right, like, how have I set this up that I'm encouraging people to do what I want them to do? One of my favorite things, because what's the one product that we want to make sure that like pretty much is never the only product that they buy, right? That one single 8x10, because if they come to a session and buy a single 8x10, unless you're charging $1,000 for it, you're going to be losing money on that session. So instead of, saying, maybe I don't sell 8x10s, or like having it on there and worrying that people are like, oh, see, I'll just do that. I don't even put a single 8x10 on my product guide. I have a collection of 5, like $500. If you want to buy 5 8x10s, okay, we can start talking. And of course, if a client comes and they buy a beautiful wall piece and they want to have an 8x10 for their desk, sure. You don't have to advertise all those little things. So all of the conversation that you're having with your client on your website and during your inquiry process, and, when you're talking to them and your emails, talk about what it is you do and how you're different and how you serve them, which is often tangible, beautiful products that are going to last a lifetime. Because digital files, even if your work's completely different than everyone else, are still so much of a commodity. They don't understand why those digital files are $35 and yours are $3,000. It doesn't compute. Where when you start to say, here's this beautiful, floating framed acrylic from Germany, and, they're like, oh, they start to understand why that might cost more. Or even prints. When you get prints, and all of my prints, a floppy print never leaves my studio. They're all mounted on styrene with the linen texture, UV protection. So I can say, these are my, fine art prints that, have a linen or that plastic backing, styrene backing. I don't call it plastic, even though it is.
So it's something more tangible.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're explaining the benefit. So you're like, I have the styrene backing so it doesn't bend. It doesn't warp. I have the UV coating so it won't fade. So you're telling them this is basically why it costs more. And they're like, oh, okay. Then they don't compare it to Costco because it's a different product.
Yeah. And that's important too. And, once these people kind of start to, and I think at some point, if they're going to they connect the dots and you get that aha moment, like, you're right, no, this isn't going to work. But then I think it goes to that other extreme, maybe where $1,500 a person, and I would never do that. So they assume nobody else would do that, which is another whole discussion. But if people do, I think, start to get a little bit of this together and they're doing some work and they're starting their business, the other, I think, giant mistake, and you're dead on with this, and you mentioned this in one of your episodes too, is the first, they want to go online, see what photographer X is charging, see what photographer over here is charging. Well, they're charging this, so I must charge the same thing, or $10, like less. There is this sort of drive to see what everybody else is doing and do the exact same thing, which is probably, and you would back me up here, the exact opposite, or at best, really bad way to proceed from that point.
Yeah.
Well, please explain why.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea if they're profitable or not. No idea. And same thing goes to, you guys, as you look at other photographers' social media and they're posting stuff. And, this happened to me when I was starting, and I'm pretty sure it happens to just about everybody, that you are, new to your business and your calendar's not full yet. And you look at other people and you're like, oh, look, they're posting all the time. Oh, they must have a totally full calendar. Oh, they are full. Oh, their prices are this. So because they're busy and their prices are this, that's what I need to do. But you don't realize they're working their tail to the bone, and they have no money left over. They're working like 80 hours a week. They're up all night editing, trying to deliver these images. You have no idea what the quality of life is on the other side of that business. So that's why it's so important to figure out what your numbers need to be and learn from, other instructors, teachers, resources that teach you best practices to make sure that your cost of goods sold are coming in at 25% or less, which is what PPA recommends, is they've looked at so many studios to see what's profitable. So there's just so many moving parts, and it's so easy to let your brain just, see other things going on and trick you into think that's the right way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. And people see that, but you don't know if that person, like you said, profitable, they could be a nut job. They could be not booking any people.
Yeah. They could just be showing images they've shot for a long time saying they're booking people. You have no idea. No idea.
You don't know what, like you said, they may not have any business costs. They may not have or maybe you're looking to rent a place and they don't. There's no way really to compare. Like, it's not a price comparative thing in that way. I think that's a mistake. You got to start with yourself, like you said, and what you want to make. Yeah. And for more or less, it's not, but kind of even ignore that, because in the end, it really doesn't matter. Yeah. I think it's not really, doesn't matter. And I think that weighs a lot of people down. They get stuck in this, well, if this person's charging $300, I'm going to only charge $200. Wow. Yeah.
And for something that you said too that made me think of an important point is when you were saying, oh, well, I would never spend $1,500 for this. We're not our target client. And I want everybody that's listening to this right now to think of something that you really value. So for me, it's vacations. Unfortunately, in 2020, haven't had many of those. But in an usual year, I love vacations. I love going to nice restaurants. I will spend money on those two things. I will never, ever spend more than $100 on a pair of shoes. I will never spend more than $20 on a purse. Like, no chance. You would never see me with one of those $3,000 bags or, $2,000 pair of shoes. I don't care how much money I had. So I am obviously not the proper client for like Louis Vuitton. I am the proper client for fancy resort. So same thing with our business. There are clients out there that value what we do. And there are also clients that will value what we do if we explain what we do. There's others, like that person you talked to with the CD, that don't. So that's fine. We explain what we do. They're going to go away. They're going to hire someone else. There's nothing we could do about that. And
right. That's
we
not
should
your
just
person and
let them go.
Yeah.
But I also want you guys to think about a time when maybe you had an experience that you ended up spending more money than you originally planned, and you were really excited about it. So for me, one experience I can remember is when I invested in professional branding. So I had been in business for about 5 years. I had like DIY'd my branding before. So I invested in a professional to do this. And a lot of the costs were coming in $2,500, $3,500, somewhere in that ballpark. Well, the company that I fell in love with was almost twice that much. And I couldn't wait to spend my money with them. And I look at it and I'm like, what did they do? Their messaging was totally different. They owned who they were. They didn't try to fit in and say, I've been a photographer since I was a kid and I've always loved picking up a camera. No, they were fun. Some people read their website and were like, oh, these people are not for me. But people like me were like, oh my God, you are my people. I need to hire you. So just think of a time where that happened, because if you own who you are and what you offer and your personality in your business, you are going to attract people like I did to them, to your business they're not going to care what it costs, because they just have to hire you because they love everything you stand for.
Yeah. And that's like I said, I think people put a lot of their prejudices, their own prejudices, that can impact them in terms of pricing. And maybe until they really see that somebody else is doing this too. And then it can be done. I understand that. They're stuck in that, that it's like almost like a self-defeating cycle.
Yeah.
Because then you get no people and you want to charge less and you want to charge less and you want to charge less. And it just kind of, it goes down from there. And and I heard you mention this before, and I do want to relate this a little bit to what you do in the pet business. I'm guessing you said more. There are strata. There's high, medium, and lower, and it really doesn't matter. I don't think what somebody picks, as long as they do it properly. Now, would you say is the pet business? Would you say now that's still something that's still growing?
Oh, yeah.
There's still opportunity there for people.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that as far as how it's developing?
Yeah, the pet industry in general, I don't know the exact how many billions are spent in the pet industry, but it continues to climb exponentially each year, in the U.S. and worldwide. And so many more households are forgoing having children or waiting until they're older to have children. So there's a lot more people that have their dogs as their basically, furry child. So it's just absolutely expanding. And I love this perspective on it too, because 10 years ago, there was maybe one or two pet photographers in a city, maybe. Now there's certainly a handful, sometimes many more in the bigger areas. But if you look at it like this, so many people think, oh my gosh, there's too much competition now. It's going to be so hard. But how many dogs are around your city? A lot. There's no way you can photograph them all, number one. Number two, how many people do you say, I'm a pet photographer, and they say, what, really? So when a large number of people have that response, that means there's still a lot of people that need to know that we exist. So that means for every new pet photographer in the market, that is more awareness marketing for the general public to be like, oh, pet photography is a thing. And then they go online and they start to look and they try to find their person, the person that they connect with, and that's who they're going to hire. So even if they learn of pet photography from someone else, usually they're still going to do a little Google search and see what's available in their market. So, oh my gosh, yeah, there's so much opportunity there. And I encourage everyone to look at that as, it's not saturating the market. It's just educating the market.
So there's still time, and there's still for people to get into this. And when someone comes to you, do you really get involved with the part and direct them? Yeah, it seems like you should be one of these higher volume, lower price people. Is there anything that would lead you to believe that somebody, like if they don't really have editing skills, or if they don't want to get down and do really like sit in Photoshop and do great masterpieces, they're better off doing, or maybe for some reason they're in a city and they can survive doing $50 shoots and do 10 of them in a day? Would you direct someone to that, or do you leave them to make up their own mind?
No, I leave them to make up their own mind. I would say for someone to thrive, I've never really done high volume, low cost. So, I might not be the best to speak on that, but it would definitely be someone that enjoys new, busy, work, and really loves the shooting and and wants to create, basically it's like almost a production line. You're going to be creating a lot of the same thing. Whereas what drives me is creating a beautiful art piece. So that requires a little bit more time, and they're always different. And I love working with my clients and creating something special for them, that comes down with the consultation before. Even if they book the session before a consultation, like we always have the consultation before the session, and it covers much more than where are we meeting and what time we're going to be there. It's talking about what are we creating? Because I'm going to shoot for an album completely different than one big wall piece. Where in your home do you want to hang this wall piece? Is it vertical? Is it, horizontal space? Do you want a gallery? Do you want one big image? Do you want a family image of you and your dog, or you, your husband and your dog? Do you want just the dog? Are you not sure? We want to maybe have both of those options. What does your home look like? Are we thinking like a rustic barnwood frame? Or do you want a more modern acrylic? Because all of those things go into my decisions of what I want to shoot and where we want to shoot and what this end product looks like. So that's where my passion is.
Right.
And which is
individual, more detailed,
which is definitely
customer service
a more
approach,
more high-end option because of the time needed for it. But yeah, it can be profitable to be lower or more high volume. It can be profitable if you did an all-inclusive. I had a friend, she was a family photographer, but she had all-inclusive digital package. She rocked it. I mean, she knew what she was shooting. But it was like $1,500. It's more now. That was, like almost 8 years ago. So it's probably over $2,000 now, but it's, she had this whole set of people that trusted her. They knew her. They started as newborns. They went through families. And she had a rockin' business. So you can definitely set it up however you choose. It's just so important to know those numbers and to keep track of your time, because that's the big X factor that people tend to forget about.
And it would seem to me too that that higher volume situation too probably isn't suited to an individual operator as well, because if you're based on volume, that seems like to me you'd want to have like one of these team things where you hire a bunch of high school kids or something and send them all out, and then you're churning in that way, because how many possible photo shoots can you, I guess if you book them a couple in a day you can do it, but that would be draining.
Yeah, like
after like 2 weeks you'd be like, what am I
I'd be exhausted.
And just for reference, we're talking about low-end stuff here, but in the world of pet photography, I know you can still have $4,000, $5,000 clients and probably up. And I think, too, it comes down to a little bit of, would you rather have one $4,000 person or like 10 $100 people or 20,
right.
And that what's going to drive you crazy or not, or how busy you want to be. Now, when people, would you think in the business too, you can start to transition? Like, would you tell someone, all right, start low? Because like anything else, you're probably not going to be a genius photographer at first. Right. Now, the one thing that happens in like women's portrait photography, and it became very popular for whatever reason, like 5-6 years ago. I don't know exactly why, but there were throngs of people who suddenly became aware of this. And what happened was, Debbie's at home and she had this cupcake business and no one wanted to buy her kale strawberry cupcakes. So she became very disenfranchised, and she took a picture on her iPhone and uploaded it to Facebook, and whatever friends were, oh my God, Debbie, that's a great picture. You should be a photographer. Oh my God. And she's like, you think? So she sold the stand mixer she bought, and she was very angry because no one would buy her cupcakes. And she goes on Amazon and buys a camera, and suddenly she's a pro boudoir photographer now, never having touched a camera in her life, but having a website now and a camera makes her, like a pro. Yep. And as long as she is there changing lives, the narrative is more important than what you're doing. In pet photography, is there such a narrative, like people get into it for the wrong reasons, or that people just suddenly decide they meet someone like you and wow, I'm going to do that, and they're really jumping into it before they really have any skills? Or what is the learning curve, do you think, involved to work with pets?
Oh yeah, I think the learning curve really is similar to any photography genre because you're learning the photography and then you're learning to manage the animals. So just like if you're going to be a newborn photographer, you need to learn the photography and then you need to learn the special skills for posing newborns and things like that. So we all have our, like for boudoir, you need to know how to pose people flattering, like, you know, all these things, all these special little tidbits that you just need to know for each specific niche. Oh gosh, so I forget. What was the beginning part of that?
So
I started to go off on a tangent.
That's all right. need some more Pepsi or need something else, or maybe something else. And
it is Friday.
When people are jumping into, like I was, we can. We'll have the drunk photography podcast. When people are getting into pet photography, I was saying like the miscues in boudoir photography are really this false narrative that they're changing lives, which seems to be more important than actually knowing what you're doing. So in pet photography, do you find a lot of people getting into it for the wrong reasons, or a lot of people really, again, buying that camera saying, I'm a pro now, before they really have a lot of training behind knowing what they're doing?
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely specific things you need to know for any niche that you're going to be in. As far as pet photography, I don't think there's wrong reasons per se, unless you think, oh, the pet photography is growing, I'm going to jump in there because there's opportunity, but I don't really like dogs that much. Not a good reason. Like, you have to love these animals, or there is no way that you are going to have the patience to do with this. And your clients are going to see through you in a second, because your clients love their animals.
That's the most important.
Yeah.
Being in their,
and they can tell, they can sniff out a non-dog person from a mile away. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be like, you know, have your own dog. I actually didn't get a dog until 4 years ago. So the first 6 years of my business, I was the only pet photographer on the planet. Well, there are a few of us, but
you're very busy.
Not many of us had a dog. I had a cat.
Very busy.
But it's important that you really enjoy working with the animals, and super important that you will spend the time to learn about the natural history of these animals and what their body language means. Because it's our responsibility when we're photographing these dogs to make sure everyone's safe. It's our responsibility to be stewards for these dogs, because, you know, the owner and any, like, you know, like a mom at a family photography session, they're stressed to the max. They're like, Junior, you better cooperate. Thinking the same thing with their dog, like, better sit. Or they think, oh, it's okay, he's okay off leash, because they think, oh, well, if I want a picture without a leash, I need to have him off the leash. Meanwhile, 90% of the images I've taken, the dog was on leash. So they have these, oh, no, he's fine. Like, we have to be able to know behavior enough to be like, that dog's not listening to her. Hey, we're going to put him back on leash, and then we'll take that out in post. So just being able to things like that. And when dogs start to get a little uncomfortable, especially if you are a family photographer that wants to photograph dogs too, because that's a stressful situation for everyone. Those dogs are picking up on mom's stress, kids' stress, your stress. Like the kids,
they're not sure what's going on.
The kids crawling all over the dog, and the dog's like, I'm in a new situation. Everyone's stressed. What's going on? Like, you just don't want anyone to get bit. So you can start to see these little warning signs in the dog of like licking their lips, or their ears going back, or a little bit of hair standing up on the back of their neck, or just like a little tiny quiver in their lip, tail between their legs, like these really subtle signs that they will start to exhibit before, you know, the situation goes bad. So, and to a lesser degree, when it's just, you know, you and the dog owner and there's no kids involved, you know, if you want this beautiful picture of this dog up on this kind of like wall or something, but the dog's not comfortable jumping up there on your bench, and there's like some holes, and, you know, and you're taking a picture and the dog's like head's down and their shoulders and their ears are down, like,
it's uncomfortable. You can tell.
And the owner's not going to want that photo. And, you know, so it's important just to be aware of that, so that you can make sure it's the best experience for the dog, and the personality of the dog is happy and, you know, excited when it comes through in the pictures.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's something you can't learn in an ebook.
No, well, you know, but it's also, Yeah, you can learn in a book to know what to look for, but it takes practice with actual real live animals.
Right, time and experience. And I would guess, I don't know this. Are there interns or like a wedding, they'll have second shooters to get involved? Are there people who do have like someone come along, or is that not how it's done?
Sometimes, especially if you're photographing with any sort of artificial lighting, I find it's really challenging to use light stands because the dogs are moving so much. So I much prefer human light stands that are
a little bit.
That I just say, keep it right here on my head. Like wherever I go, it moves with me.
It sounds like you need some drama.
Exactly. So there are opportunities. I mean, you could also probably intern with a dog trainer, things like that. There's a lot of dog training material online, dog behavior material, YouTube videos online that you can seek out that information for as well.
This may be a strange question, but still related. Now, in your experience, I'm guessing if I contacted you and I said, hey, I want to do some pictures with my dog, how much do you ask about the pet and its behavior? Or are there certain dogs that you would say, yeah, that's not really my thing. I don't work with this particular species and you may not say it to the person, but they're known to have issues or they're known not to be the best for photos. Is that like a reality of dealing with certain type of pets?
So certain breeds do have certain tendencies. Oh my gosh, I can't say that word. Anyway, certain breeds have certain characteristics, but I would never label that whole breed as, aggressive or bad or challenging. And I do ask questions so I have a questionnaire the client fills out, and then I also go over it kind of verbally when we're on, our pre-session consultation. I ask about how nervous the dog is, if the dog's nervous or if the dog's really confident in new situations, if they have any triggers that make them a little anxious, like bikes or other dogs, new people. And then we kind of choose our location accordingly. So like my dog's super reactive. I could not take my dog to a
some dogs are just very hyper, and when they around people, they're very excited. They're never going to sit still.
Oh, we've got some
dogs
tricks
may be
for that.
or aggressive. Some dogs may be, because you don't want to go out somewhere and the dog's just like bouncing off the walls because it's just.
Well, though, for the hyper ones, they're usually pretty easy to start to kind of calm down. I'll keep a leash on them the whole time. They're still in one spot. We have lots of novel noises. They're like, "Ooh, what's that?" For a dog that might have an aggressive tendency, I'll still photograph it, but I will be very careful, and I'll probably just use a long lens. Like, I'm not going to come up and do a wide angle lens, like over top the dog of the dog looking up, because that's going to be
the next block with like a 500 millimeter lens.
That's going to be very nerve-wracking for that dog. And then there's, always some breed characteristics, like, for instance, photographing greyhounds or sighthounds. A lot of dogs' noises are like my key for getting good expression. But sighthounds are so visually driven that usually you can do one noise, one time, and they get their ears up, and then they're like, nope. I don't care what noise you pull out of your bag, no chance. So you have to start throwing things and having someone run. Or bring a squirrel out of your bag or something.
So is that
there's
most
certain
of the
breeds
time
that are more challenging.
Is it really like a lot of setup beforehand, or is it often you show up at a location and you're doing the photos, or is it usually a bunch of calming down and getting everybody used before you even start to take out your camera first?
Totally depends. So my general workflow, kind of when I get to the new location, I've already had the conversations with the parent, but I get to the location and I meet the dog, and I'm not going to come up and be like, oh, it's a dog, because the dog might be like, holy cow.
Right. So that seems like the last thing. Yeah.
So I meet the client and I just kind of ignore the dog for a minute, keep an eye on the dog. If the dog's interested in me, I'll reach my hand down, let him sniff, and maybe then squat down, give him a little pet. I'll pull out my camera. I'll just hold my camera to my side and press the shutter and make sure there's so
it gets you.
Yeah, no big deal. And then, we have some treats if need be. If the dog needs to walk around and sniff around and settle down for where he is, we can do that. We can take a break. It's just really keeping an eye on their behavior, and again, knowing that body language and that behavior, and just
working from there. Now, this is a sad kind of a question too, but I'm curious here. Do you ever, and this is awful, but when you get a call from somebody or something, their pets are maybe terminally ill, or there isn't much more time with this particular dog, and they may even be very ambulatory. Is that a situation that you may have to deal with too? Or have you gotten calls where, Fido only has a couple weeks left, can you help me out? And how do you work with a situation like that?
It's actually fairly common, unfortunately, because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the challenges with pet photography is there's no timeline. So there's, high school senior, you're graduating. A wedding, there's a wedding date. A newborn, they're born. Like, they have a specific time that you hire this photographer. Pet photography, it's like, oh, next week I'll do that next week. And then all of a sudden the dog is, has a terminal issue. So a lot of times people do call because their dog is, has a limited time. And for those cases, most of us in the industry try to basically drop everything to try to get that dog a session in.
To accommodate.
Yeah. And then some people have special packages for it because, you're not necessarily going to put a giant wall piece of your dying dog on your wall. So maybe the sessions, and they're smaller and shorter sessions because the dog's not as active anymore. So maybe it's just like a little image box with 5 images or something in it that you just build a little something special.
I was just always curious, but it's interesting to hear that that's actually a part of that industry. So I guess that can really be, it could be sad.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
It is.
You
just have to look at it from what a gift you're giving to the owner, that without you doing this, they're not going to have any images of their, their favorite dog.
What? All right. Well, I won't talk about anything more sad things.
You're going to make me cry.
I know. I'm sorry. All right. So we're actually going to get back on the track. We diverted off of our notes here. And what we're going to talk a little bit about here, no more dying. No more pets.
No more.
With people who are getting involved and running their pet photography business and say they do want to go ahead and bring this business more upscale. And a lot of people do that wrong. And this is where I'm like, yeah, this is 100% right, what your notes were on this. And the number one thing I think, all right, I'm going to be high end, but yet I'm going to say that in name only, but there's really nothing else about your business to back this up. So this is a very common problem, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I mean, think about any high-end experience, whether it's, Apple computer or Tiffany's piece of jewelry or a really nice steakhouse or, high-end shopping, whatever it is. Think about the high-end experience. Think of cars. Think about going to a BMW dealership versus a Hyundai dealership. And you're taking your car in for service, and they'll come pick you up and all this, They
give me a free car.
They'll give you a foot rub while your car's getting, serviced. So when you have a photography business that started off, more high volume, just, not building around that value, and then all of a sudden they just jack up their prices. The rest of the experience needs to match that. So that starts with your website. It better be, clean, easy to navigate, and speak to the value of what you offer. It's not enough to have just some pretty pictures. It definitely needs to look like it was built in the last 5 years and not holdover website from 1998, because that will immediately turn people off. And even when, Jane talked to her friend Sarah, and Sarah said, oh my gosh, I just got photos done from this photographer. It was so amazing. She's still going to go to the website and check you out, even though it was a referral. So the website is 100% critical. And then what's the process after that? So they get in touch with you. How do they get in touch with you? Can they call you if they want to call you? Do you have where you're located on there? What happens if they email you? How long does it take to get back to you? What does that look like? Could it be something like, is it a video message? Do you call them? Do you just email them a generic price list? What does that experience...
Or worse.
Yeah. What does that experience look like, and how can you make it feel exclusive? And how can you serve your client? If you put yourself in your client's shoes and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, if I wanted to have this service, what do I want? They want information quickly and easily, and they need education about it too. And so you need to talk to what makes you different from all the shoot and burners. You have to speak to why your prices are what they are. And I don't mean saying, my prices are what they are because this is what photography costs and blah, 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 blah. It's not from a I need to prove something to you. It's just from hey, these are the benefits. These are the benefits of choosing to invest in your artwork. That you have, archival products on your wall. I like to say, yes, I do sell digital files, but most of my clients choose to add those on to their beautiful, tangible artwork because digital files basically can go the way of dinosaurs. And I even say with a CD, I'm like, think about a CD. You can't even play a CD on most computers anymore. That changes so quickly. So, and I go at it from my why basically is I want them to have these things that they will have forever. I don't want them to sit in a drawer. And that's why I do what I do. And this is why I choose the very best products in the industry. This is why I have 100% satisfaction guarantee. I tell them if they're not happy with their products, I will buy them back from them. I've never had to do that because people are happy with them, but it makes them feel more secure with, she's looking out for me. I see why this costs more. But it's all of those pieces working together. And by far the biggest piece of that is your experience and your communication with the client. Because, a lot of times they just want the information and nobody will answer the phone. It depends who your target market is. If it's young professionals, maybe they're totally fine and they just want a video message and some emails and ways for you to talk.
Sometimes it's hard to get people on the phone
ways to talk digitally with you. But if you're targeting empty nesters with their little, Cavalier King Charles dog, you better have your phone available because that demographic wants to pick up the phone and talk to you.
Yeah. And the one thing I noticed too, you'll see I'm a fine art photographer. And like you mentioned before, it'll be like some website decided by a third.
Yeah, right.
There. And, they're like, but the message isn't there. And, I think that's super important. And not everybody has not a lot of people build their own website, but it can cost you $4,000, $3,000 to get. And I think that's so well worth it again, especially if that's what your message is going to be.
But even if you weren't ready to build hire a designer to do your website, there's so many clean templates out there that you can.
Yeah, if you're on WordPress or wherever, that you can
just put together a clean, easy to navigate website. And make sure that your work, your portfolio is cohesive, that it's not like, oh, look, I dabbled in sepia. Oh, and this one's black and white. And hopefully there's no selective color, but everything.
Oh, my goodness.
Everything just, to have this high value experience, your website or your portfolio needs to be cohesive. It doesn't mean everything needs to be shot in the same exact style, but it needs to
have a continuity.
Yeah, if you put it all out, I used to tell my people for my family sessions, put the whole family's outfit on the bed. If there's a piece that's sticking out, as if it's one big outfit, and make sure it looks nice together. Same thing with your portfolio. Put it all up on your computer screen. And is there a piece that's that one doesn't fit? You can still shoot it, but don't put it in your portfolio. You need to curate that so that people know what they're getting.
And the message would be going, like you said, to a fancy restaurant and walking in and them giving you a paper plate with a hot dog on it and you're like, wait,
there's a white tablecloth and a plastic fork. I guess in an airport that happens, but anywhere else.
Yeah. But people pick up on these things. And if you are going to wedding, whatever your business is, if you're advertising yourself as this high-end type of person and you're giving somebody a hot dog on a paper plate, there's discontinuity there, and they start to they start to question things, and when people get a little confused, they're more apt to say no, or you're not likely, I think, to win them over in that respect. But people fail even if they get the website, I think, part. You're right, they forget about how am I responding promptly, or video emails, or whatever it may be, and going right on down the line. And if you are sending out price sheets and stuff like that, it can't be something you you wrote down on a paper napkin and snapshotted it with your phone and emailed them. There's a whole litany of things that you have to have in order from top to bottom that sort of are going to be behind this high end type of a pricing here. And any one of those things not being there can start to cause the person, I think, to be like, well, what am I doing here? This doesn't seem like it's justifying those expenses in there. And one of your other pointers you had on one of your shows is about brand alignment. And this is kind of what we're talking about here, being in line with the markets that they serve. And your example was like, Holiday Inn Express, just because can't go and charge $600-$700 a night, just because they feel like they suddenly say they want to be like a boutique hotel. And it's a very similar thing with photographers. You can't have like a third grade looking website, and I don't think start charging people $4,000 for their photos, because it's not going to fly in that regard. And moving on just to one more other topic here, and we're talking about like, if you are getting or thinking about going into the high-end pet business, and we were talking about this a little bit before, is dealing with cheaper competition, because it's going to be out there. And interesting that, and I remember this, and you said you saw recently, there's companies out there even giving away free shoots now.
Free shoots.
And
It's like
charging
$15 a file.
Like a picture. And I remember, and I don't remember where I saw this, like years and years ago too, with someone doing this with portraits. And it wasn't like a one photographer. It was like some kind of one of these Uber type things, but for photographers. And you did this, and someone, I don't know whether they showed up at your house for like $35, and I haven't seen it in like years and years and years. I questioned was the validity or more the long-term value of this. But that could be a real panicky thing for a lot of people. Is, all right, I've just been talking to Nicole. She sounds like she knows what's going on. I'm going to do this. I got my website. This guy, Mike, says I need to know how to talk to people. I got a fancy price list and I video emails. We're sending them out, and I'm ready to go. And then they're on their Instagram or something one night, and they see a little ad for free photo sessions for pets. And then they're like, oh, should I make mine free and charge $15 a photo?
Or even if they not asking, should I do that? They all of a sudden go to, oh, there's no way this is going to work. There's no way I can charge that. I might as well close up.
Nicole,
forget it.
All your information was bad.
Yeah.
I'm shutting down. I got to sell my camera again and get a new stand mixer. I'm going back to making cupcakes. But the truth of the matter is, and we've been talking about this, and this again applies not just, it could be baby photography, pet photography, anything, that this is not a threat to anybody. So please elaborate on why, even if this is down the street from you, this is not a threat.
Oh my gosh, there's so
business.
many reasons why, and I love this topic. So number one, let me start this way. Imagine this triangle, and you can have fast, good, and cheap. You can only have two of those three things. So you can have fast and good, you can have good and cheap, or you can have fast and cheap. So usually this, I'll show up at your house, $15 a file, comes under fast and cheap. They're leaving that good market wide open. You look at this, and they're the Ponderosa. They're not even Ponderosa. They're catering to like McDonald's value menu. They are not even talking to your same target client. And as far as pet photography, this would be the same for newborns and families. Generally there might be someone that they get that is decent. There's going to be zero consistency. They're going to have no idea what kind of images they're going to get. They're certainly not going to know how to work with the dogs. They're not going to know, or in that price point, there's not going to be any post-processing included. And everyone gets worried, the phones take such good pictures now. Okay, great. But yeah, guess what? That phone can't remove the dog's leash. And the phone can't print a beautiful, 40-inch acrylic. So there's always room in that market. There's always room in the market for excellence. You can look at any luxury part of any market, and there is always room for excellence. Heck, I was reading my one of my travel magazines the other day, and they had, I forget if it was, I think it was this one again. This is like the second time I've seen this in the past, 10 years, where they had different beach towels. And I'm a, $10 beach towel from Costco kind of girl, but they had a $450 beach towel. I'm like, who in their right mind is going to spend $450 for a towel they put on the sand?
Someone's flexing out there. They want that towel.
But there's somebody buying that towel. So it's just not even the same target market. And one other point for this particular topic too is I noticed this a lot in family photography. My last couple years doing family photography, which was, like 2015-ish, where I was getting a lot of clients coming to me, and I always ask them if they've worked with a professional photographer before on my questionnaire. And a lot of them were saying yes. And the next part of that question was, did you have how was your experience? Is there anything that could have been improved, basically? Oh man. The amount of people that would come to me as a full service wall art providing photographer that answered that question, yes, I did the all-inclusive cheap option, and the service was terrible, the quality was terrible, it took 3 months to get my photos, whatever it was, there was some issue. And now they're like, oh, I'm happy to spend $2,000 now and do this right. So I've started to see that happen in the pet world now too. So, people, they get, maybe the first people when they first, hire a photographer, they get tempted by the fast and cheap, but they realize that they're missing that good side of the triangle.
Yeah, and I guess one thing too, and you learn this as you go along, if you are going to price yourself on the higher part of the spectrum there too. I think one thing that may be tough for people to be able to deal with as first is you're going to get a lot of no's as first. Now, I don't know, are you an advocate of putting a lot of pricing out on your website or no? Or do you really have to do that consult first?
Yeah.
Because this is a very hot topic. People are on both sides of this.
It's interesting you bring this up, because in the past I have always said that I basically do a starting ad. Like most clients spend at least $500 on their portrait experience. Or I might show some products and have a starting at price, but I never had full pricing. Now, I have not tested this, so nobody take this as gospel because I have not tested it, but I actually want to test that this year and switch up my website and put not all of my pricing, but at least some like all-inclusive packages and include a wall piece. Because I am looking at it from a consumer point of view, and I like to ask myself every once in a while, like, what are the pain points for my potential clients? And I recently refinanced my mortgage, and holy cow, the biggest pain point ever was you can't get a straight answer for what things cost. Like, I just want to call a bank and be like, assuming I have good credit, like, what's the best rate you could give me? I know you can't guarantee that rate because you need to do my credit check and all that stuff, but what's your best rate? No one will tell you. You have to do the call and go on a 25-minute call with them, and and it's just when you're trying to price check a couple things, and I know that's a commodity, but I feel like there is I think there is opportunity there for us to serve our potential clients better, to give them an idea more so than it just starts here or it goes from X to X. So anyway, I'm going to test that out. Like I said, it's just a theory.
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and the reason why I was asking you, just because if you're high end, either you're going to get a lot of no's, whether you see them or not, because if you list pricing starting at $2,000, $3,000, if people see that, next. And then if you don't list anything and they contact you, and Nicole, where generally my clients are spending about $1,800, usually in the low end here to here, and there, a lot of people aren't going to say right to you, oh, that's too much for me. They're going to be, thank you, we're going to get back to you.
I got to check with my husband.
But I think, I got to talk to so-and-so. And then there's a whole well, if he wasn't involved, how do you feel about there's a whole way to go down and do that kind of a thing. But you're just going to get more of those no's, I think, because your market is going to be fewer people there. So I think that may be something that a lot of people have a tough time dealing with, or they feel they're missing out. But wait, if you don't want to spend $2,000, maybe
then they start willing.
And there's a lot of psychology that goes on there, and I think part of it comes down to maybe what suits you. But it's one of those, and I've done it both ways, and half full, half one way, and you put prices on there, and you could draw up, but you don't want to mislead anybody either, saying it's lower, and then look at this, now I got to pay for this, and this. And I kind of settled on a system. First of all, you were talking about message. I think where your website has to give that impression. All right, this is something that's a little fancier, putting luxury on there, or whatever that may be, and the quality of your images and stuff like that. So you got to start people off, maybe put in some text. But one interesting thing, and I've done it, in both ways, is that having the pricing on there, if you're committing to a price, say, even if you're putting a range, you may run into some people that said, well, I would have paid, he's putting this as 1,000. I would have paid 2,000 for this. So now I'm getting a deal. There's other people who say putting 1,000 on that, you're going to turn away a lot of people, or getting them involved in the process, and then they're going to feel very awkward knowing that they can't pay that money. So I guess it depends on which side of the coin do you see that. Is that opportunity where you're going to be missing out on people who wanted to have paid more, or you're really worried that you're going to hurt, the feelings of people. And as weird as it sounds, I chose not to have pricing on my website. And what I did in my case was on my contact form, I have a couple of weird things on my contact form, like how excited are you? But one of the things I have on there is kind of like they do in weddings and stuff, like what is your budget? And I don't have any numbers. I don't have any, 500. It's just that number. And I think what that does is when somebody fills that in, it gives up a lot of information to me to know where their brain is. And if somebody does put in like $300 or something like that, I know that's not my person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's all they're willing to spend. It may be that they don't know what they're looking around and seeing that, so that becomes the challenge. But like if you said, if someone fills in, I'm getting married, I want a fancy, and they put $2,500 in there, then you're right. All right, so now I know where they're going to be. So I think it comes down to the individual. I'm very happy to do it in that way, and I get plenty of people filling out my website. I got one the other day that put like $100 in there. I'm getting married $100, and then I wonder if they're serious or not. But But see, I have another knock. See, this is like bad stuff. I have a knockout question on my thing too, where it says like, how excited are you? See, this is bad. Don't ever do this at home, anybody, what I'm about to tell you. And it says, like how excited are you to work with me? And if anybody's not like a 9 or a 10, I don't even contact.
You're like, here's the form,
literally.
email.
And I get people. Just this week, I got one woman who put a 5 in there. Like, why would you go through all this stuff?
Yeah.
Pick a 5. She also put a real low amount in there, and this is bad because I'm good with my people, but I know, I don't even, because I don't have the time, and I'm so busy. I don't. But I think going back to that budget part of it, it's an interesting experiment to see what works best for you. Because you're right. I think a little bit, as we were talking about before, people may put their prejudices on there because you don't like to go through that. Just like we were talking about before, where no one's going to pay that, to get that budget out of people because you don't like it. But I found that it really shifts the power to me in a matter of speaking of knowing where that person is sitting. And then I can approach that person, whether I send them a little video note, oh, hey, Mary, I see you put 3, but, we're usually in this range and I'll be happy to explain to you why. And people, and I think it has to do what we were talking about earlier too, and that in the world of photography, unlike big brands, people may not necessarily understand, Mercedes is, they don't know they're going to pay more. They don't necessarily understand that. And seeing pricing out of context, I think isn't super helpful because I always assume I'm not the only person that somebody's looking at. They're probably looking at 10 other people. And if this person's 500, 600 and you're 2,800, these numbers don't mean anything, like you mentioned, because they don't know what they're getting for that wall art and a super fancy album. All they see are these numbers. So any thoughts on that or
no, for sure.
What would you think?
I would never put all of my pricing up there, but like I am toying with creating a couple basically like collections. So like the wall art collection, our goal for the session is to create a beautiful wall piece. And it starts at this, it starts at $550 and includes like a little, 11 by 14 or something that they could upgrade. I need to figure out what exactly it is, but it's just like basically, or an album option, just so they have an idea of, oh, look, that includes those things. Or a custom, like you really want something off them that we can create a perfectly custom something for you. So it's still just floating around in my head. So it's not for public consumption yet.
No, it's right. It's working through. But it's an interesting thing because once you have done so much of this, you start to see these patterns and so forth in what you're doing. And I also think, and this is just me, but when you're working, again, weddings, whatever it is, in that higher end, I think that allows you to be more accustomed to. I don't think you need a price list that is just written in stone, and you can't go, no, this is this package and this package. You have to live by one of these packages, because the people are spending, and you would say to that person, okay, I understand, and then you you have the liberty to adjust these things to do something maybe that's going to suit them a little bit better. And then, you can adjust. Well, you may say, oh, are you interested in, well, that portrait wouldn't work for you. It's a good thing that we did this. And here's what you really may work best in your situation, and adapting that and that pricing, which is a lot more work. And I think the one thing that a lot of people overlook in the world of photography, and I know you don't like to use this word as sales. They're talking about being salesy or so forth. But I think there's ways to communicate with people that it doesn't come across salesy. And trusting and being honest and genuine.
Yeah, it's a
with
service.
People.
You're providing a service.
Yeah. And that happens in the onboarding part of it too, to get them to come in to see you. But also, I think afterwards, when you're sitting down, and I know you mentioned too, you're a little bit of IPS, and we're having like a great time talking here today. But
go on all day.
And this is only one Pepsi. Imagine if I had on an empty stomach. But when it comes to the IPS, or you call it IPC, I guess, because
right.
want to think of sales as kind of how do you work with that as far as making it a personal thing? See, I do that, but in my case, my people come from all over the place. I have people from New York, so I can't bring people in and like sit them down because it's way too far away. But I guess you could do it remotely.
Yeah, I've done some Zoom before, especially this year.
But I'll talk a little bit about how important this is. And,
critical. Yeah.
And this could be related to this pricing thing, because this is where you can sit down to somebody and say, Jane, all right, well, I don't really want to say, all right, I'll tell you what I'll do. And you can really be a little bit more adaptable to people and help them out a little bit more in that way.
So my most important inquiry question, which ties these two together really well, is how do you want to display your images? That is the question I ask all the time, because that, like your budget one, that's my secret question that gives me like a preview of what they're thinking. So what were you thinking of doing with your images? Oh, just some digital files. Okay, we have a conversation to have. Oh, I want to get something, from the living room. Great. I know what conversation where we start. So always talking about that. And like, we basically decide, they're not committed to purchase what they're going to purchase, but we've already talked about it at our consultation, that we've talked about what we want to create in the session. So we've already basically talked about what they intend on buying. So by the time we sit down to go over our images, I know exactly what they want. That we go through, I show them a slideshow, we choose their favorites, and I say, all right, well, you already sent me the wall for your living room. Here's some of the ones I was thinking of, but this was your favorite. Here, let's pop this one in here. Here's the different finishes that I have. I think this will look beautiful in your home. What are you drawn to? And we just basically design that piece that we've been talking about, or a gallery, or if it's an album, whatever it is. I usually design wall art first. I'd say that's my most popular thing. It's what almost everyone gets.
Is that what in portrait, like wall art, is you think the biggest thing?
That's what, at least for mine, but that's what I love and that's what I speak to. So
your preferences,
Yeah, so that tends to be my biggest seller. I know some people that really speak to albums and love the albums, so that's what they sell most of. So it really can be whatever it is that you love and you educate people on the value of. So we design the wall art, and then I show them my album samples and tell them that many of my clients choose to do an album or an image box of some of their other favorites. So they may or may not add those. And then the last thing is if they wanted to add the digitals and or prints. And that's easy. Like, I don't have a gazillion items on my price list. It's wall art, albums, or image boxes, and prints and digital files. And
people put way too much crap on there. But see, this again is part of your service process in taking people through this, because what I think, there's so many photographers that leave so much money on the table at this point, because they're like, They're like handing the person the menu.
Yeah.
Just let me know what you want. They don't, and people don't know.
An online gallery that I did that, they're going to get a couple 5x7s or 8x10s because that's what they know. No one's given them permission to do a 40x60 above their couch. Like, no way would they ever order that without them seeing mine when they come into my sales room, which is my dining room, set up as a sales office. I have a 40x60 of my daughter and her horse on the wall. Like, they come in and like, that is stunning. You can have it in your house too.
And they don't know that something like that exists. And then people are like, wow, I need that.
And then the 30x40 looks teeny tiny.
Next to I need as a canvas, they make them that big or no?
The framed acrylic is beautiful. I had to put like 3 anchors on the wall though because it's super heavy. Right into the studs. Boom, boom, boom.
Metal rivets going into the. You have to put metal studs and like reinforce.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's such a mistake, and with people leaving money behind, and I think part of that too is feeling maybe they're being a little bit pushy, or they don't want to force people into doing that, and you have to gain that comfort into talking with these people. Again, it's not necessarily pushing things on people, but making them aware and just saying, "Oh, Judy, this is the perfect wall piece for this."
Yeah, and I just tell people to change their perspective. You're not selling. Don't call it a sales session. You just want to help them enjoy their images. So it's just about showing the images and helping them figure out how they're going to get the most enjoyment out of them. Like, never is my intention to be like, how can I pad this sale? I mean, it's, of course I want my bottom line to be good, but my intention is to make sure that they love their images and to help steer them to the ways that are going to fit their home the best and bring them the most enjoyment.
And you'll even make arrangements for these items to be installed.
Oh, yeah, sometimes, yep. Mm-hmm. Especially if it's going to be a 40x60 acrylic.
Yeah. Just get a little hammer.
Good luck, here you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I think we talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much stuff. It's so fun. It's a great conversation.
We could just go on and on. I know there, and it listening to it's just one of the things I think that people get a lot of value from, and I think the bottom line in a lot of this stuff is there isn't necessarily one right way when it comes to like displaying pricing or what you do, or low price, high price, medium price. I mean, you have to run your business in a certain way, I think, to be successful and deal with your clients in a certain way. And ultimately, I think it's like playing the guitar or anything else. You find your way, you find your style, you find what works best for you and your personality. And I don't know, maybe if you're not so great with dealing people in front and doing sales, you figure out some other way to do it online or video. But,
I do have a friend that does just online and is just pre-set up packages, and she's really successful too. So, you really can do it just about any way, but you need to do it with intention. You need to know why you're doing it that way, and you need to make sure that there's not something you're missing that's going to bite you in the butt.
Right.
Like your time.
Right. And also the realization here is people have to understand in the pet business or whatever business that they're not going to make a living selling people $35 CDs, and then there's another whole world there. And it's so important, I think, now, and this really didn't exist like when we were getting started, 2006, 2007, in that time, where you offer your services to somebody, and whatever that price is, it's so well worth it because you can accelerate somebody 4 or 5 years ahead of where they would have been figuring this out on their own, and how much money they could have earned. And, it's such a benefit to people. So after all this great information that we gave away, what I want you to do is just take a few minutes to talk about the Hair of the Dog Academy and what you do there, and now how people can
Sure, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, we're at hairofthedogacademy.com, and we also have a podcast, the Hair of the Dog Podcast, which you can find links to all this stuff on the main website, and tons of free content on hairofthedogacademy.com. But for those of you that are committed to building a profitable pet photography business or committed to really improving your craft, Hair of the Dog Academy is a membership site with, oh my goodness, we have so many courses related to shooting, post-processing, marketing, pricing. We have guest instructors, so some of the leading pet photographers in the industry are also teaching inside the academy. Office hours, one-to-one laser coaching sessions, critique corners where you get your work critiqued, Facebook group, like all sorts of incredible content in there. So definitely check that out. For you extra special listeners of this podcast,
got something free for
special
them?
trial. It's not quite free, but it's $1. So I think we can all manage
All right,
that.
well, there you go.
Yeah,
be fine.
7-day trial to the Academy for only $1. So you can check that out. Ooh, I love the sound effect.
We got applause.
Excellent. You can check that out at hairofthedogacademy.com/trial.
Outstanding. And then on your show, your podcast, which I'm creeping around, I'm listening to you all the time. Yeah, I'm listening. And really, your content, like I mentioned before, is really just some of the smartest content. And as I mentioned, you remind me a lot of me in this no nonsense, kind of, it's not going to work. You got to do it like this. And it's very informative, very smart, and very straight to the point with not a lot of, some people, and I always mentioned in talking about this with somebody before, and I hate to keep repeating myself, but when I'm working at night, often I will have like a podcast on. It's not always photography, listen to other stuff. And one night I was just doing a search and came across someone that was giving tips for this certain type of photography, how to start, and my super important tips. And I happened to listen, and it was on in the background, and I'm like stopping and I'm listening, and I'm like, what the hell is it? Was just like, the Peanuts where the teacher was like, wah, wah, wah. That's all it was. It was just like, wah, 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 wah. It was like, it was non-advice. It was just and I was trying to find out about this person, and look, they have no evidence of them ever being involved in anything what they were talking about. And you could tell this person didn't know really. They were just reading information and regurgitating it. Like they read something from a business guru, and they were like,
you do.
One of these hustle people. They're hustle. We're grinding and we're hustling. And I'm like, this is like non-advice. But your show is just the opposite of that. It is just like dense information. And again, it's not just for pet people. I found it's a lot of smart content in there, and you have good guests on your show that can really broaden the knowledge of tons of people. And so the podcast is the same name. It's the Hair of the Dog podcast.
Thank you.
And going on there for a while. So you're like one of my new best friends now.
Yay.
So thanks for
of course,
coming
it was
on.
so fun.
Glad I didn't
I could
scare
talk
you
about
away.
this kind of stuff for
And-
weeks.
Yeah, me too. And that's a problem, because then we realize we've been sitting here
now
for
it really is happening.
an hour and a half. And then, like I mentioned, I haven't eaten. I had all today. I've had like a half of a kind bar since like 7 o'clock this morning. So Mike is going to go
get
eat
some food.
and sit down for a moment. And I just want to say
of course.
thanks again. And then before we I just wanted to say goodbye to everybody so we can get out of here.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with us.